Well, some really interesting connections this week on the OHL podcast. We get the chance, well, it's all about me. It's selfish. I get the chance to catch up with the guy who was the captain of the Guelph Storm when I first broke into the Ontario Hockey League as a broadcaster. Now, he's still playing and I'm still in the O, except he's been way more places than I have. Charlie Stevens joins us on the OHL podcast. It's great to have you here. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
First overall pick into the Ontario Hockey League. Let's start right there because that's not something they can take away from you ever. What's that like?
You know what? It was a long time ago, first of all. But it was just part of my teenage years. I didn't really plan on being drafted high. It wasn't an aspiration of mine. It just kind of happened. I had a good year in junior B, and I was a big kid. So I think back then, I think they were looking more for the big, power forward. It was a different kind of game. But things have changed, and it's flattering. But yeah, it was a long time ago, and it didn't mean a whole lot at the time. It was just a way to get into the league, and here I was.
So back then, did you have any idea? Like you said, it wasn't an aspiration, but as that entry draft is coming closer, do you have an idea that you're going to be one of those top picks?
Yeah, I did. I knew. My agent knew. Like we had, connections at St. Mike's, and that's where I was headed. So I knew what was going to happen, and I had a speech prepared and everything. So that kind of made it easier, I guess. It wasn't nerve wracking, and I was just kind of like, I knew it was going to happen, and the day went smooth. So
you talk about how much the game has changed, and yet you're still a part of it. I know I'm kind of jumping around the timeline here, but how on earth do you pull off that feat, Charlie?
It's an addiction. It is. That's what it boils down to. I'm addicted. Like, yeah, you play hockey for so long, and then to be able, I don't know, some guys are, when they retired, they're able to just shut that switch off. And I can't. But I've got three daughters, like I mentioned earlier, and I've coached their teams, and I love it. I have fun with it. And then playing myself, when I retired, I came back to Canada, and I still had to scratch that itch. So I played in the senior league and the Allen Cup League, and it was great. It was a lot of retired pro guys. Then COVID obviously shut everything down, and then the Elora team got back in the senior league, and I had a couple connections there. Like, are you officially retired? I was like, well, kinda. And then here we go again.
Here we go again, indeed. Okay, you mentioned those connections to St. Mike's when you came into the O, and as you joined that team, it was kind of the return or the entry into the Toronto market for the Ontario Hockey League. We still kind of pick on it just a little bit, Charlie, because it doesn't get the fan support that you see in other places. But what was it like being a part of that as it returned or became a part of the Ontario Hockey League in Toronto?
You know what? To be absolutely honest, it was tough. Like we all know, the media there and the pressure. Not necessarily tough on me. Like I was just there to play a game, but I don't know if they had the right things in place. I think there is a long tradition at St. Mike's with hockey, but it's historical. And coming into the OHL, I don't know if they had all their ducks in a row. And looking back on it now, at the time, you thought, yeah, I'm 16 years old, I'm just going to play hockey. But looking back on it, we had Mark Napier, who had never coached before. Mike Futa was young into the game, and it seemed like we were kind of winging it, which probably shouldn't be, but it turned out okay. Like we had a decent year, but then as the years passed, I think I honestly didn't follow it that much. They don't have a team now, and I just kind of like faded. But yeah, it was tough. I think if they had the right pieces of the puzzle, it could have went much better. But I think it was a bit of a blindside there in St. Mike's that first year or two.
What about that barn? That is a barn to play in.
Yeah, I wasn't too excited about that. I was a skating forward, and I wanted, I love the big ice, but that was a barn. That was tiny. It was narrow. Hash marks were like touching the boards. It was tight. We did have maybe 6 or 7 games at Maple Leaf Gardens, which was really cool. Except when you get 1,000 fans in a 16,000 seat arena. But it was still nostalgic. It was pretty cool to be on that ice. But yeah, like I said, it was a tough setup to get into the league as a 16-year-old for sure.
When you were playing that rookie season and you had come into the league as the first overall selection, do you get a lot of chirps? Do you get a lot of extra slashes on the ice when you're trying to make your way through the league?
I wouldn't say it like affected the game physically. Not like you're getting extra hacks and whacks, and I was a big guy, but um, yeah, mentally, like I was all kinds of mental warfare, right? You're getting chirped all the time, but I mean, if it's being chirped for going first overall, it's not that's not going to cut too deep, right? It's there's all kinds of chirps which we probably can't say on the air, but that's the least of my worries is getting chirped for having success. But it's part of the game. It's still going to continue to be part of the game. The mental warfare that goes on out there.
How much different did you find the O from your year prior in junior B?
Yeah, I was in Leamington junior B, and it was a step, but not a leap. It was back then. It was like that junior B, the Western Ontario Junior B League. There, it was pretty good. We had Joe Thornton and Brian West. We had like a decent amount of names coming through there, and it wasn't a huge leap, but I think it was different going from Leamington, the town of, I don't even know, like probably 10,000 or less, to Toronto. You know what I mean? And driver's license is new, and you know what I mean? Like, your 16-year-old kid, I had to take a bus to the subway to get to St. Mike's to go to school, to a school that was tough too. Like I was a decent student, 80s, couple marks in the 90s, couple marks in the high 70s, what I mean? So I was doing okay in school, and then you get to St. Mike's and you're like, oh, everything dropped 15-20% and you had to battle for it. So yeah, there was a lot of changes outside the rink, I guess, that were more influential than the on ice stuff.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because all my years I've sort of overlooked that aspect of the game, and it's something that we've been talking about a lot more lately. You're a 16-year-old kid, and you're all of a sudden thrust into this brand new city with a brand new family, trying to play the game that you love, but figure out all of these other things. And as you're talking about, from Leamington to Toronto, that's a massive leap for a young man.
Yeah, and I grew up outside of London in Nowstown, which is a tiny little town. But so yeah, you're making leaps for sure. And I would have considered myself fairly mature, and I thought I handled it okay. There's maybe some things I would have done different, maybe some things I would have done the same. But getting to that 16-year-old in Toronto, but also in a new organization where they didn't have it all figured out either. Like billets were just kind of getting pieced together just weeks before the season. And, like one of my buddies that year was Chris Mava, defenseman. And it took me like 45 minutes to get to his house if I wanted to get there. You know what I mean? Like bus, subway, so it wasn't like Leamington where he could walk or bike to somebody's house or whatever. But it was just, there was a lot, like you said there, a lot you don't think about, a lot outside the rink that you have to figure out, and fortunately I did play in Leamington the year before, and I was away from home that year. So I already had been away from home. If that had been my brand new first year away from home, homesickness and all that stuff might have kicked in and it would have made it even worse. But at least I had that experience under my belt. But yeah, it's a pretty big jump.
If I remember correctly, Chris would have been, if I'm thinking of the stats, Chris would have been a pretty good friend to have. Not that you were a shrinking violet, you were a big kid coming in, but that guy wasn't afraid of anything on the ice, and the penalty minutes proved it.
Yeah, no, he was a tough D man. We got pretty close that year, and he played the game hard, simple, and like we said, it was a different game there. It wasn't necessarily all skill focused. There was part of the skill was being able to run the guy through the boards. So I was a big guy, and I think deep down I was a big player physically, but I wanted to play small. I liked to skate. I liked to dangle. I liked to, pass the puck around and score. And that was my game. And I think that's something that when I talk to younger players coming up, I'm like, you just got to be you, right? Like, if you have the influence of a coach and a GM and your agent and all the other pressures that you have, and they're telling you one thing and you might want to do the next, and you just got to be true to yourself and play your game. And I got kind of caught up in you're 6'3", 225, you need to be Eric Lindros when I wanted to be Mario Lemieux. So it was it was kind of like, if I could talk to my 16-year-old self, I would be like, hey, you just do you, don't worry about everybody else, and go with it.
Yeah, easier to say now than it was to do then, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so given the bumpy road that there was with, Toronto St. Mike's, getting traded might not have been the worst thing to go to an organization like Guelph. What was that experience like?
So yeah, that trade. So I had a no trade clause in my contract in the deal, and that trade was requested, and that was heavily influenced by my agents. Darren Ferris and Bobby Orr, and they're like, you got to get out of here, because there was stuff going on outside the rink. That was the whole David Frost and Mike Jefferson, that whole situation, which was kind of creeping in there, and it wasn't going to get any better. So my timing when I left there was good. It was kind of before that blew up even bigger. And then going to Guelph's awesome. Like, Guelph was a great place to play. Nothing bad to say about that. Small town feel, great fans, and great arena. And it was just a good setup for me.
And while you're there, some guys named, let me see, St. Pierre, Paillet, Dustin Brown start showing up, and you're like, okay, we got ourselves a little something cooking here, don't we?
Yeah, we had Craig Anderson in nets. We had Brownie. We had Kevin Dolman on D, and so there's some good pieces of the puzzle, and a lot of guys went on from that team that year to play pro hockey. And even the first year I got there, we had guys like Kent McDonnell and Ryan Davis and Kevin Mitchell, that little defenseman. Like, he was great. Like, we had a good group of guys, and we made a good run there, and we had success. But then how my Guelph days ended, same thing, no trade clause, didn't go anywhere. But I was drafted to Washington originally, didn't get signed, got redrafted to Colorado. And I'm playing my 19-year-old year, owned by Colorado, and I'm going to training camp after the season. And great shape, doing like my best. I go in there, I'm working hard, and I get cut from the AHL team in Hershey. So it was unexpected, and now I'm coming back to Guelph, and they already had 3 overages, so I'm the 4th overage. And Jeff Jackson was the coach at the time, and he's like, well, we got to figure this out. And we're 2-3 weeks into the season, and he wants to rotate 4. Like, he wants to rotate 1 out of the lineup every 4 games. And I'm like, well, I can't miss 25% of the games this year. I've got to play. So then I requested a trade to London. No trade clause. So I'm like, I just want to go to London. That's it. That's where I'm from. Be nice to live at home for once, or for not for once, but for one time in the last 5 years. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was going to Western, and I'm like, this is the perfect setup. And it was also the Hunters, and the Hunters are awesome. Good people. One of my favorite coaches I've ever had. So going there was awesome. And then talk about people you play with. I go there as an overage player, 20 years old. Here's my right winger, Corey Perry, and my left winger, Rick Nash. I'm like, okay, we know those names now, but at the time, you think Corey Perry's a skinny little guy now. You should have seen him when he was 16 years old. And then Rick Nash on my left wing, and they were doing amazing things then. So I was spoiled playing there, and I feel like we logged 25 to 30 minutes a night too. So it all worked out great for me. No regrets. I'm glad that move happened, and we went on from there.
Corey Perry is just coming off one of the most remarkable National Hockey League runs with back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals appearances. You talk about him, you think he's a skinny guy now, but when you think of the Corey Perry you knew then, and now you look at what he's been able to accomplish, any surprise on your part?
No, like playing with him when because he was an underage that year, and he would have been 16 and Rick Nash 17. But the way he played, he played like he was fearless. He'd get tossed around, yes, but he still does, and he's still effective. You know what I mean? He's great hands. He touches the puck every time it's near the net, and that was his game. He was never, dangling and blowing by people wide. Like, he's just knew what was good for him. He knew what worked for him, and he executed it perfectly.
You mentioned the Hunters being there in London, and I did want to ask about that because the year you got there was the year it all changed. And since Dale and Mark took over that franchise and Dale became the coach, it's been an absolute model of success. Every team in the OHL would like to emulate that. Can you put your finger on what it was when Dale took over that just changed? Like maybe you can finally be the guy that answers this for us, Charlie.
I don't know about that, but when I went there, they just bought the team and they had the old ice house. And I believe Lindsey Hofford was the coach when I first got there, but he only lasted a couple of weeks. I think the game plan was to get Dale on the bench. And so he came in after they let Lindsey Hofford go. And it was, we were an 8th place team that year. We ended up beating out Plymouth first round, lost to Erie second round in 6 games, and then they went on to win it all. So like we had a team that wasn't much, but we got so much out of it. And that I feel is from coaching. And I think now that I coach my own kids and I help out here and there, I realize that 90% of coaching is mental, is psychological. Everybody can have their own X and O plan and this and that, but it's getting the guys to execute, getting them to believe in themselves. And Dale was able to do that. He brought the best out of people. And you almost felt like guilty not playing your best for him because he's such a good guy. He's got your back, and you just wanted to do your best. As far as the move to the new rink, that was the year after I left, and then I think they won the Memorial Cup or hosted it the year after. Like, so it was just, I think the on ice product that Dale was able to deliver just fell right into the business side too. Like he wouldn't have been able to do that if he had a 2-50 team like they did the one year. Like you can't have a losing team. You have to have a good product on the ice first. I think Dale built that foundation there, and then the business end took off.
You talk a little bit about coaching and your kids today, but even prior to that, with one of your former coaches, Sean Camp, you end up coaching University of Guelph Griffins for a few years as an assistant. How'd you like it?
I loved it. It was nice because I was like assistant. I was like, I was that guy that just came to practice, work on skills, have fun with the guys, and got to watch Sean Camp do his thing. And like I said, Camper was there in Guelph, and he is maybe one of the most positive guys out there. I don't know if you know him well, but he's your biggest cheerleader and your coach at the same time. So when I retired, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I'm only 20 minutes north of Guelph. So going there was perfect. And it's funny because I called him up after probably not talking to him for a decade. And I'm like, hey, and he's like, yep, come on out. Right. Like, in practice Tuesday, I'll send you the schedule. And so welcoming. So I was able to do that in my, I think 3 seasons after I retired. And then just life gets busy and I didn't have the time commitment to keep it up, but I'd love it. And I still text them every once in a while and see how things are going.
As I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, you had the C on your jersey in Guelph. What does it mean to you to get that letter on your jersey in the Ontario Hockey League?
It's flattering for sure. It's a sign of maturity and not just your on ice stuff. It's not necessarily all about, points and how you play and that. It's a lot of it is about being able to get the guys going in the right direction. Like I just said, it's 90% psychological as far as coaching. A good captain, good assistant captains, good leadership on your team is going to make the coach's job even easier. So it's something guys take pride in, but it's also something that's easy to do if you have a good group of guys. And, when you're all pulling the rope the same way, it's just things go so much more smooth. When you have a team that's losing and you're the captain, it hurts your pride a little bit too. You want to give it that extra. You got to be that example. So it's definitely flattering to wear a C or an A on any team. And I don't think it depends on the kid, but I don't think it's that stressful mentally because the reason you're named the captain is because of what you're doing on the ice. It shouldn't really change your game, but it should, give you a voice that's listened to a little bit more in the dressing room.
Were you vocal in the room?
Yes, I was never a rah-rah guy. I was always, quiet-ish, but when you spoke, people listen. I find it's more respectful that way. If you have a captain or a leader that's just always go, 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 you maybe listen to him a little less, even though it doesn't discount what he's saying. It's just when you speak a little less often, maybe people's ears perk up a little bit more. So that was more of my leadership style. It was kind of like say what needs to be said when it needs to be said, and it worked well.
We were talking earlier about some of those players that you had on those Guelph teams with you, including Dustin Brown. It just so happens that we're having this conversation in the days after Dustin Brown not only had his number retired, but a statue erected for him outside the arena in LA. When they erect the Charlie Stevens statue, where is it going to be?
That's never happening. No, I'm not getting a statue, that's for sure. That's a bit much, but that's worthy of what Dustin did in LA and what he did all over the place. He was just a really good kid, good head on his shoulders. Never got into trouble. Just in work ethic that was unmatched. Good example of a hockey player.
When you look back on your OHL days, Charlie, I was thinking of that, and you alluded to it, the upset of Plymouth in the first round when you were in your OA year with London, come in as the 8 seed, knock off the number 1. What stands out to you as a memory? What really is burned into your brain from your years in the O?
I think it's almost dissected into half, like on ice and off ice. Like we mentioned, you're 16 to 20 years old. Like there's so much you learn in life, whether you're in the O or not. If you're just, average Joe, your development, you're learning so much about the do's and don'ts and life in general. So I learned a ton outside the rink. You make some mistakes, you learn from them, and then, you grow. And, so that is a lot of, what the talk is now with mental health and all that stuff when you're in that 16 to 20 in junior hockey. And then as far as on the ice, it was just a game. Like you're just, I don't know. For me, I always realize I'm playing a game and I get to do this and I'm actually getting paid, even though it was like $50 a week or something. But it was the love of the game, and that's why I admitted at the beginning of the conversation, I'm addicted. I still play, and I want to still play I want to stay healthy and be able to do it and do it with my kids and have fun. But I never really got caught up in the business end of hockey. I didn't, I just figured I worried about the on ice product. The rest will take care of itself. And it does sometimes get a little bit too businessy, if that's a word, where you're treated like a commodity. But at the end of the day, if you can understand that, it's kind of, you are a commodity, right? It's a business, right? It's big money. Like you said, the London Knights and all these franchises that are making millions and are worth, tens of millions in their franchise value. It is a business. So I think a lot of it comes down to just how focused you can be. You keep the off ice stuff together and you keep your on ice stuff producing and you have fun along the way.
So speaking of that business side then, how tough was it for you after being taken in the second round by Washington when it didn't work out there? Were you confident you'd get that other shot, which you did with Colorado, obviously, but.
Yeah, not really. Like, I wouldn't say I was confident. Like, I got drafted to Washington, happy to be there. Went to training camp a couple of years and I had good couple of years while I was there. I think the year that I was supposed to sign, like that second year under being drafted by them, I think I had 38 goals. Like I had a good season. I thought maybe I'd get a smaller contract or something and nothing. But they actually sent me a letter, which I think is uncommon, and just explained why. And they said, we only have X amount of contracts. There's only this much left. That year they drafted, I think I was their 5th pick. And I was, I think, 31st or 2nd overall. So they had a lot of picks. And then right after me, I think they had no. So I think they just had a lot of guys. They had a deep draft. And you're only allowed to sign, I think, 50 NHL contracts, your AHL team. So they sent me a letter, said, sorry, it's not going to work out. Wish you all the best. And that's it, which I respect. And then re-entered the draft, not knowing what's going to happen, and got drafted to Colorado. And I was happy, at least somebody wanted me. And then played my overage year, and that ended. And then we're in the summer, and I'm like, okay, well, now what? Right? I haven't heard anything from Colorado. I had my education package from the OHL, and I was already thinking, well, in London, maybe I'll go to Western. And then it was like a week or two after I was having those thoughts, and I actually talked to I forget who the person there in Western is. Clark, I think is his last name. But anyway, then Colorado offers me this contract, just kind of out of the blue. And I debated it for about a minute, and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. You're right. I want to play hockey. I did have to think, like, I've got 5 years of education paid for versus this contract that wasn't great. But I'm like, you know what? I want to play hockey. So signed it, took it. And my first game in the NHL was that first year at Christmas. I think it was December 27th, got to play a game in the NHL. And I remember talking to family. They're like, who cares? You got a game under your belt. You got one. You got one more than a lot of people. So it was the right call, kind of thing. And I was happy with it.
Yeah, that's like I said at the beginning. Nobody ever takes away first overall into the Ontario Hockey League. Nobody ever takes away the 8 games you played in the National Hockey League. What was that first game like for you? Did you get the rookie lap?
You know what? I don't remember. I think I probably dragged my heels, make sure I didn't go first. But no, I remember, just trying to soak it in. I knew I wasn't going to play a lot of minutes. It was interesting because I didn't really understand, like, it was my first year pro. I didn't understand, like, kind of how things worked. Like Joe Sakic, he sprained his ankle and he was going to be out a week or so. And I get called up, and I'm like, well, I'm not taking Joe's spot. I know that for damn sure. But then the trickle up, so then I'm fourth line center, which is fine. I'm happy to be there. I get to play. Like, I probably only played 7 or 8 minutes that game or less. I don't know. So it was just kind of like happy to be there. And then I played 2 games and got sent back down. And they were happy with me logging those minutes, and it was a simple assignment and done. And then the next year, I get called up, sent down, called up, sent down. Called up, don't even play a game, sent back down. It was just like I was getting ping-ponged all over the place. And that really, I struggled mentally there, where I'm like, what is going on? And then I wasn't doing well in the A, and it's kind of like this mental game. And that was tough. And then I ended up getting traded to Ottawa from Colorado, and fresh start, great. I go back, I play in the HL, and I'm killing it. I was point per game and playing well, having a lot of fun, and it was a good switch for me. And and then this is the up and down, get a trade. And then the next year I'm like, yes, okay, now I'm getting a shot. Lockout. I'm like, damn it. Right? It's just timing. Just get, it was like I was 2 games next year, 6 games next year. I'm like, okay, I might break through here. Lockout. I'm like, oh crap. But we had an awesome year in Binghamton. We had Spezza down there, and we finished first, lost first round, which really sucked. But I thought I'd have a decent year there, set myself up for the next year. And then the next year, had great numbers, played well in the A, and then not a sniff. Didn't get a single game up. Didn't get a contract offer to renew because I was done then. And that was basically it. Then it was kind of like, well, what do I do now? And that's when Europe came to mind.
So when you decide, or when you're considering the move overseas, you said before that you had to think about the deal with Colorado for all of a minute because you have those other options, including your 5-year education package. Now you're thinking, okay, I'm having some good years, but I'm not getting the option to go back up to the National Hockey League. So if I'm not being renewed here, you want to keep playing, and you've made that clear. You've got that addiction. What was the decision-making process like to decide, okay, I'm going to go overseas and play hockey?
Yeah, I think the main factor was kind of comparing what could be to what I have. And I had to decide, do I like the status quo? Can I play in the AHL, get 2 or 3 games a year kind of thing, fill in, maybe break through, maybe not. At that point too, I was 24, so Ottawa at the time has 6 years of drafts beneath me or above me, right? So you have to try and think about realistically what your future is like. And then when I weighed that against going to Europe, it's less games played, it's easier on your body, no more hacking and whacking, or I guess less hacking and whacking and less fighting. And the money was much better in Europe than it was in the AHL for sure. So I signed a 1-year deal thinking that I would go there, see how it goes, and then figure it out halfway through. And about 2 months into the season, I signed a 2-year extension because it was awesome. It was a ton of fun. It was, to talk about the previous year of the year to the lockout, up and down, not knowing where I was going to be. You know what I mean? Living out of a suitcase. It was not an ideal life. But then going to Europe, everything just slowed down, and it was, guaranteed money. It was, housing, and it was a car and all these perks that come with it. And then the way of life is just so much easier and less stressful.
What was the hockey like?
It was good. I think in Europe, including Russia, I think Russia is like competitive with the NHL, like how good it is. Obviously, there's bigger names that come to the NHL, but I think the hockey there is good, and the money as well. And then I think, there's Sweden's got a really, really good league. I think Germany, Switzerland, you have, kind of like maybe the second or third tier over there. But I think the hockey itself was good. I enjoyed it. Like, it was more my game. Like, talk about not having to be Eric Lindros and being Mayor Lemieux. That's what I wanted to do, right? So it was a lot more bigger ice for one, a lot more speed, a lot more skill. Definitely comparing it to the AHL, and a lot more fun, that's for sure.
And your production never really tailed off a ton while you were over there. What was the secret to maintaining that kind of pace?
I think kind of knowing myself, knowing as I age, I'm going to get, so if you go from a first line center, you're expected to get X amount of points. You're expected to produce. And then maybe, 5 or 6 years into your career, you're battling for the first time. So you can change your game a little bit. Now I'm a two-way center. Now I'm just as valuable, maybe more. So I can, work on that second unit and still contribute offensively, but be dependent on. And then maybe in your later years, you're a third or fourth line center where you still have value. It's just in a different aspect of the game. So my numbers did slowly fade, but that's the natural progression of a hockey career. It's in my eyes anyway. And that's a testament to my longevity, that I was able to play 14 years. But if I had have been, nope, I'm a first line center, that's it, maybe I only played 4 or 5. So you have to be cognizant of your abilities and your value. Like I said, you're a commodity sometimes. So you have to just kind of figure out where you are.
Did you have a favorite spot to play?
My last 5 years over there was in Cologne, Germany, and I loved it. Awesome city, great fans, great rink. Like, the rink set 18,500. Like, it was a huge rink, and it's a big market team. Ton of fun. Uwe Krupp, remember that name?
Sure do.
He was my coach over there for the first few years there, and awesome guy to play for. Players coach, had a lot of fun, and Cologne was definitely one of my favorites for sure.
Was it tough then to come back and kind of reacquaint yourself with North America, or was home always, we're going to get back there someday?
We always knew, my wife and I and the kids, we always knew when I retired, he was going to be back in Canada. That was, it's where our family is. It's where our roots are. So that was never a question. The question was when, and, as my, years started to fade, I kind of knew, I wanted to retire because I wanted to retire. I didn't want to retire because I couldn't find a job. And that year my contract was up. They weren't renewing, which was fine. And I'm like, I'm going to have to go to a new city or a new country, new school for my kids, new setup. And I just realized at the time, like, I have to retire at some point. I'm not going to play till I'm 60. Like, it's going to happen whether I retire at 35 or 37 or 45 or whatever it is. I'm going to have to do this. And am I ready to do it right now? The answer was yes at the time. So, it was an easier decision for me and my family at the time. It was just the right moment.
When you're over there, how many guys do you cross paths with that you had earlier in your career? Because I get the sense that so many end up over playing somewhere in Europe.
Yeah, and I think Germany is a bit unique because there's usually an import rule, a non-German passport, or if you're in Switzerland, a non-Swiss passport, right? So you're only allowed so many imports. So I was an import because I was a Canadian passport the whole time, still am. So I was playing as an import. So in Germany was the most. I think my first year might have been 12, and then it dropped to 11, then dropped to 10. So I think right now, yeah, it's 9 or 10. So you got 9 or 10 other, well, usually North Americans. You have some Swedes, or you have Czechs, you have other nationalities, but usually the majority are North American guys. So even for my, off ice stuff, for my wife, she's got other options of girls to hang out with, and it just makes it a lot easier. Whereas if you went to, I don't know, if you went to Russia and there's only one other Canadian person on the team, that's your option, kind of thing. So Germany was a good spot for us because of that support. We also lived in a community that had a international school nearby, so there's a lot of British people in our neighborhood. So it was just a really, really good fit for us.
It's pretty incredible to think back of crossing paths together in the Ontario Hockey League, and now here we are with you again, still playing, but the family, 3 kids. What do your wife and kids think of daddy/husband still the hockey player, going out to play for the Elora Rocks a couple times a week?
Yeah, they like. I think the kids like it. My wife probably wishes I'd hang them up, but it's funny because I have, like I said, 3 daughters. They're all playing hockey. Of course, none are on the same team because they spread them out 3 years. And so we're at the rink already, like 5 nights a week. And then you get a Friday off, like, sweet, Friday night off. Now dad goes and plays. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't play that many games. I think I played 8 this year. I played 5 last year out of a 22 game schedule. So I play when I can. But we do still like to have movie nights, and have a slow night at the house where everything we work on family time. But yeah, it's an addiction. I'll give it up eventually. Eventually they'll probably tell me, like, hey, Charlie, let the kids play. But I haven't been told it yet.
Well, if you're not out on the ice, though, you've dabbled in coaching. You talk about coaching your kids. Is that something that you'd consider as the next phase of your hockey career?
I don't know. It's tough because I considered it when I retired. But like I mentioned earlier, I chose to retire. It was on my terms, and I was happy with the decision. But if I had have turned to coaching, it's almost like you're hitting the reset button as far as stability. Like, what's the longevity of a coach anywhere? Like 2 or 3 years. So I'm putting my family through that, where I'd have to move every year or two to a new town to try and build my career up. And then it wasn't a family decision, or it wouldn't have been a good family decision for me to get into coaching, even though I honestly, I think I would really enjoy it. And it is a fulfilling job, but it's just, this time in my life, it's just family first, and that's an easy decision for me.
When you look back on the scope of all of it, Charlie, from that entry to the Ontario Hockey League to the, and I'm going to put it in air quotes, retirement from the game when you came home from Europe, do you ever find yourself just sitting back and kind of marveling at what hockey has brought to your life, what you've been able to do in the game?
I do think about it sometimes, going for a jog, or just, when you have some downtime. But I'm just so thankful that I had the opportunity to do what I did. I know there was one point in my second year pro, when I was talking about up and down, all that stuff. There was a time where I considered just quitting, giving up. It was a low point, and I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. It was just such a battle. And I talked to a sports psychologist at the time, which was great and super helpful. And, it turned my game around. and then I played 12 more years. I ended up playing 14 years pro. And so I look at moments in my career and where I played in that, and all the countries we've been to and traveled around. Like, I'm very fortunate to have had the success and had the opportunity in my playing career. And I think on top of that too, what hockey does to you, and what sport does, the competitiveness, the adversity you face, it shapes you as a person, and when you got knocked down, you get back up, and all those kind of sayings. and they're all true. It shapes you as a person, as a man or a female. It's so, I feel for people that don't get the opportunity to play sport and to challenge themselves and to kind of figure out what you got inside you. And I reflect back on it. I'm very thankful that I was able to do that, able to challenge myself, able to have success and do what I did.
You keep up with any of the teams, especially in the Guelph, London, that you used to play for?
To be totally honest, no.
Out of it, eh?
Even the NHL, like I do, I like getting the kids off to school. My wife goes work, and I'm here doing whatever I'm doing, and having a cup of coffee and watching the highlights of the NHL games. But I don't sit down and watch a full game. We do go once or twice a year to a Guelph Storm game because we're close. But yeah, I definitely, I don't follow it. Not because I don't enjoy it. It's just busy. I'm busy. Busy with kids, work, everything.
For sure. And like we were talking earlier, that it just so happens that we're having this conversation after Dustin Brown's number is retired. We're having this conversation just after a weekend where the Ontario Hockey League was a presenting sponsor of a Professional Women's Hockey Players Association series of events. What about one of your girls? I mean, there's more and more talk about the women's game. What if they end up pursuing the game professionally?
It's funny you said that because they went to that game in Kitchener. That was Sunday night?
Just past Saturday, yeah.
Saturday, yeah. Yep. So they went to that game. They, like I said, they all play, so it was kind of like an organizational thing. They bought tickets and they all went, a bunch of the different teams, and watched that. And I think it's great. I'm having 3 daughters, which I never thought I would have 3 daughters, but having 3 daughters, it's like girl power. Like they love it. We watch, movies, and we see the professional women's hockey, and I'm such an advocate for them, and I'm their biggest cheerleader, and I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, them watching that game, they come home and they talk about it like, oh, that was pretty cool. And there was a Canada-US game we went to a couple of years ago, and we were in a tournament in Oakville or something. But it's just great for them to see that, and it's great, it's great role models and things to aspire to, and I'd like that's something that's growing for sure.
It sounds like the transition from pro hockey player to girl dad suits you pretty well, Charlie.
Yeah, I love it. Wouldn't change a thing. It's funny because we had 3 girls, and even my wife, after we had the 3rd, she's like, well, we can try for a 4th. I'm like, no, that's enough. Yeah, no, but I love it. Wouldn't change a thing. It's awesome.
It's really incredible to get this chance to catch up with you, and I appreciate you making time in this very busy adult life of yours to talk a little bit of hockey with me. Thanks very much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Mike. It's awesome.